Patrick, we haven't heard from you in a while. What's going on in your brain?
I've just been listening to everybody. It's been great. So actually, I think this is an important part because we're talking about social chaos. We're talking about the disintegration of social systems, right? And that's really, to me, almost as pressing as what's happening to the ecosystems and to the climate system, because obviously we rely on that just in a very material sense for our well-being. But how are human beings and within the context of our respective societies, are we going to react to these things, particularly as we have this thing called the nation state with distinct borders? And, something that I thought was really interesting that I've thought about more and more is, so you've got, say, in the United States, you've got this wonderful, wonderful president, Donald Trump, who only speaks the truth and only, gets straight to the facts, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, the political crisis that's happening here is whatever. We don't need to talk about that specifically, but Trump is obviously a denier of climate change outwardly, regardless of how the military, we talked about this a little bit earlier, the military is very aware of climate change and is preparing accordingly. But, he specifically doesn't believe in it. But what I think is interesting is I think, he's been obsessed with this idea of building a wall on the southern border, right? And that's been one of his, from his campaign from the very beginning. We need to build a wall to stop the.
I wish he'd do it along Canada, right? To
to be fair, right? Jesus,
right? I mean,
yeah,
that'll be Trudeau's next policy measure.
Yeah, we'll pay for it, right?
We'll pay for it
in Canada.
Yeah.
Sorry, I threw off a very
serious.
You're great.
That was exactly my
you're
thoughts,
perfect.
Paul, exactly my thoughts. Patrick.
So you have this idea of, and it's happening, right? I mean, there are portions of the wall that are being built right now. And, especially with political and social destabilization in Central America, along with climate disruption, we're seeing people trying to come to more stable regions. These are people in what's been defined as the third world. I don't really like that term, but we know what we're talking about when we say it. And they're trying to get to a more stable region. So, he doesn't believe that climate change is real. He doesn't have the intellectual capacity to comprehend what's happening. But nonetheless, I feel like almost on a subconscious level, he's aware that there is this crisis that's emerging where more and more people, refugees, immigrants, are going to be coming from the southern border. So even if he doesn't believe in climate change, he is preparing and militarizing the border. This is a fascist response, essentially, a nationalist response to a climate crisis that's unfolding. And this is something that we need to be extremely conscious of, because I think what's happening is governments around the world, this is in Europe, this is in Asia, this is in the North American, South American, wherever, they're going to begin to prepare, and they already are preparing for what's coming. And what does that mean? I mean, we're entering into, the so-called liberal democracies that we're a part of. It's mostly a facade at this point. I mean, What does it mean to live in a climate disrupted future with these mass societies that we're a part of, and with these giant nation states that are trying to maintain their borders?
Right. I agree completely. I think that this is a very strong human feedback. As climate change worsens and accelerates, there's more and more people that can't live where they live, and they have to migrate to other countries. And then that causes, lots of people are let in other countries, but then there's populist backlashes. There's too many people coming in. So there's a backlash, and we get right-wing governments, and the right-wing governments are all about building walls and protecting, being populist and protecting their own individual countries. So I think this is a direct response to climate change that's well underway, especially, look at the Europe. And it really got going after the migrants were people were crossing the Mediterranean to go into Europe, right? I mean, that's how, and this is an ongoing, very strong, positive feedback that accelerates climate change, because then these right-wing governments that are in power ignore climate change, and therefore climate change gets worse, and there's more immigration, and it's a vicious spiral that it's difficult to see how we break.
I think the bizarre thing about what happened in Syria, I think we all know that it was mostly probably to do with drought. and them coming across the Mediterranean, was that they were drowning while cruise ships were passing them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of says it all. What interests me here is just how far these fascist states are going to go in terms of, do you see them massacring thousands and thousands of people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's like something that needs to be said, because there's this. So people don't understand that there is within the far right, very far right ideologies. They totally accept and understand that climate change is real, that it's happening and it's human caused, and that there is in fact an environmental crisis that's happening. There is this phenomenon, and this is especially in the United States. We're seeing it in other places. For instance, in New Zealand this past year with the Christchurch shooting at those mosques. But all of these, basically avowed white supremacists are shooting up places, and they're targeting people they view as being a threat to the white race, essentially, as being invaders, as being a horde. This very dehumanized perspective. And in all of their manifestos, there's usually an ecological component to it. They think that in order to save the environment, we have to have more militarized borders and stop immigrants from coming in, and refugees and all these people. And as we enter into a more another more climate disrupted future, the logic of these ideologies is going to make more and more sense to people. And so we need to, part of being aware of climate change and all of the things that are coming as a result of that. For me, I've been trying to really emphasize this point, like, be careful in the language you use and how you talk about whole groups of people. What would you do if you were at a place that was disrupted with climate related disasters and you had to get out of there? Do you want to enter a country where people literally want to kill you and put you into detention camps where you could be, left to die on a cement floor? I mean, that's literally happening right now in the United States.
In the U.S. Mm-hmm.
In the U.S. So I think that this is a huge part of it too. I mean, when we talk about our response to climate change, it has to be from this has to be from a place of empathy, because we're all in this together. The people that are born in the global South are the same as us. They just happen to be born under a different set of circumstances.